Hey there everyone, welcome back to my channel. This is Joesephyr, and something you guys have been asking me for a little while now, and I did double check on my Facebook page, which I will leave a link to in the description box below, is that you guys would like me to do more content to do with Dissidia NT. Now, I'm really happy that you guys are wanting me to do that, because I've been wanting to do Dissidia NT content for a while, but I was always worried that it would fall on deaf ears, because facing fact, I'm not the most proficient player at the game. I'm hardly like top tier or anything, but I do genuinely really enjoy it, and I think that there's a real cult following for that game out there, so I'm hoping to be speaking to you guys out there. But today I wanted to cover some of the DLC characters that will be coming to Dissidia NT. We've just had Locke revealed, which is really cool in my opinion, and I know that there's been a lot of hate going around for the DLC choices so far, but honestly I love them. Like, I'm maining Vayne now. I'm maining Vayne over Kuja, so you know, those of you who follow my channel know that that's a pretty big deal for me. But I wanted to go over kind of the remaining hints for the DLC characters that were left for Dissidia NT and kind of giving a little kind of feedback as to what I think the characters could be or what I wish they would be, and then hopefully create a discussion for Dissidia NT. Before we get into the breakdown of the characters we'd like to see, if you guys are interested in Dissidia NT, or if you already own the game and you're looking to just get a little bit better at it, I found this fantastic video, which I'll leave a link to in the description box, from Dissidia Nervicia Tournaments, which gives you a really nice breakdown of kind of the key fundamentals that you need to play the game. And these kind of videos are the sorts of videos that I would like to be making if I felt better educated about it, so I definitely wanted to link you guys to this so that you can get a bit of a foundation for building, you know, your skills up for the game itself. So going off of the hints that Square Enix has given us already, we have obviously 6 characters for DLC within the Season Pass. We had the first of which already, which was a new male character from the latter half of the numbered Final Fantasies, which turned out to be Vayne, and then we have a new male character from the former half of the numbered Final Fantasy titles, which has turned out to be Locke. So what does that leave us? The next character is supposedly a new female character from the latter half of the Final Fantasy series, then we have a male character from the latter half that's new, and then we have a returning female character from the latter half of the franchise, and then we have another male character from the latter half of the franchise to top it all off. Now the first thing this means is that, more importantly, what we're not getting, which means that because there are no male characters listed from the latter of the former half, or female for that matter, there will be no more entrants from characters from games like Final Fantasy 7, 6, 8, or anything like that. Well, 8 I think is on the cusp of the latter half, so I think 8 might be okay. But there will be no way for 7 characters, so that's Vincent's out of the picture. Red 13, which I thought would have been a really cool idea for the last character, but we got Locke instead, which I'm actually really happy about. There's no Final Fantasy 4 characters there could be, or you know, anything from prior to Final Fantasy 7. So, who do we think we could get next? So we know that it's going to be a female character from the latter half of the Final Fantasy franchise. Now there are numerous characters that this could be. I mean, my number one pick, and I'm sure I'm not the only person that wants this, but I know how unlikely this is, and she's a massive fan favourite, but I swear to God, if Beatrix turns out to be that character, I will lose my nut. Like, there will be no other character I would play. Like, Beatrix would be the only character, that is it. You know, game over, she is the one. However, I know that while she's a fan favourite, she's not a particularly prominent character in the franchise, so I know how unlikely that is. I think other like picks that were probably quite common would be Aranea from Final Fantasy 15. We do already have a Dragoon in Kain within Final Fantasy 15, within Final Fantasy Dissidia NT, but I do think that Aranea is popular enough, and another representative from Final Fantasy 15 would be appropriate. And I think that Aranea would be a really good pick for Final Fantasy 15, certainly over Ardyn, which I will get to later, because I know that Ardyn's a very popular pick, but I'll explain my reasons as to why I don't think he would be a very good character. But there are other characters within the franchise. Well, Final Fantasy X has some fantastic representatives in the female cast. You have Riku, although I think now that Locke has come out and we already have Zidane, that thief kind of role has been taken pretty heavily. And then we have Lulu, which there are tons of black mages within Final Fantasy Dissidia, but Lulu is popular enough that she could definitely warrant a spot. Another character on the female roster I think would be a really cool pick, but it would have been Fran from Final Fantasy XII. However, with Vayne coming into it, I mean, we already have a Final Fantasy XII representative. I think 2 from 12 and just the season pass alone would probably set a lot of people on fire, and people wouldn't like it very much. So while you have some great female representatives in 12, like Ash and Fran, I don't think it's very likely that we're going to see them. I also think that Rinoa could have been quite an interesting shout. You know, we don't have an awful lot of Final Fantasy VIII representatives in most things Final Fantasy related, honestly. And Rinoa would have kind of an interesting niche because her primary weapon is a throwing weapon, so she'd be like a marksman but a bit different. so I'd like to see her. But honestly, like, my pick still goes to Beatrix. Like, if she, as I said, if she comes out and she turns out that she's the female representative for 9, I will lose my nut. Now, before going into the male representatives, it's important to quickly go over the female returning member, because there's only really 2 options it can be. And there's Yuna, who was in Duodecim, and Prish, who was in Duodecim. As a Final Fantasy X representative and a Final Fantasy XI representative, I think that, you know, if Yuna is that pick, I think that kind of writes Riku and Lulu out from being representatives from the female new member of cast. But one thing I really hope happens, because I mean, maybe it's an unpopular opinion here, I hated the way that Yuna played in Duodecim. Absolutely despised it. But I think a summoner role is really interesting, so if she does come into it, I think it would be a really good way to kind of remake her in a different image. Though what I would love to happen, and considering that Vincent wasn't the pick from the former half of the series, I would have loved to have seen the Gunner Yuna turn up from Final Fantasy X-2. It's camptastic, it's ridiculous, and I love it. And I know that, again, that's probably a really, really unpopular opinion, but I'd love to see Gunner and, you know, sexy spelt Yuna turn up in Final Fantasy Dissidia NT. But then Prish, I do think, is becoming like a strangely popular character. Like, she's phenomenal in Final Fantasy Dissidia Opera Omnia, which is another game that I'm going to be doing some more videos on very, very soon. And she's just really, really cool. Like, although, again, it's unlikely that she's going to turn up now because we already have a monk turn up in Vayne. Vayne is kind of already fulfilling that role, so if they're spreading it out thin, I mean, all of the stuff that I'm saying could be complete conjecture and they could ignore everything I'm saying and release 2 monks. It's not a big deal. But if we're trying to think of a balanced kind of roster, I think that Yuna is the more likely of the 2. So going into the male members of cast, they are all from, the ones remaining are all from the latter half of the Final Fantasy numbered franchise. So that's anything from 8 all the way up until 15. Now, before going into the ones I do want to see, I'm going to quickly let you know the ones that I don't want to see. And the first one of which I've already mentioned once is Ardyn. Now, spoilers here for Final Fantasy 15, so if you haven't played through Final Fantasy 15, I'd suggest stopping the video now. But to release Ardyn within the game would be a spoiler for Final Fantasy 15 in and of himself, because his moveset is identical to Noctis's. So, in order to release Ardyn, I would be really happy if they released Ardyn as a costume change for Noctis. I think that would be amazing, and I think there are other characters that I think would fulfill that role really well. Zack would be a great costume for Cloud. Cypher would be a really, really good costume for Squall. I think that that would be a really cool way to like introduce some other characters so that you have a bit more scope. However, Ardyn is one that's commonly requested, and I think that it's a really bad idea to put him in there because you end up with a palette swap for Noctis, which is something that people who ever played like Smash Bros or anything, or any fighting game for that matter, used to really complain about. So it's really odd to me that people would then request it. So I don't want to see Ardyn. I'd love to see him as a costume swap. I don't want to see him as a character. I also don't particularly want to see Snow, because I don't think it's particularly likely anyway, because, well, like I said with Prish, we already have a monk. But I don't want to see Snow because he's Snow. Like, let's face it, there aren't many fans of Snow out there. He's a bit of an irritating character. But I'm sure there are fans of him. I just don't particularly want to see him. I also, and again, this is going to come off really, really controversial, I don't want to see Vivi. And the reason I don't want to see Vivi is because if Vivi's in it, the chances of Beatrix being in it are much, much lower. But if Beatrix isn't the female character, then yes, I would love to see him there. Vivi would be a fantastic character in the game. I just don't want to see him because it lowers Beatrix's chances. But then, you know, there's plenty of characters that it could be. It could be anybody. There are so many male characters within the Final Fantasy franchise that it's crazy. Although I think that villains need a bit more representation. As somebody who pretty much exclusively plays villains in these games, like my favourite characters in Dissidia NT are Kuja, Sephiroth, Vayne, Golbez. I love all the villains. Kefka, it's another one. So I think that Caius would be a really, really good, an interesting addition to the roster. Mainly because he's a Dragoon, but he's not a Dragoon. Like, he dresses like a Dragoon, he looks like a Dragoon, some of his attacks look like a Dragoon, but he doesn't carry a spear, and he doesn't have that kind of, way that he attacks doesn't really feel like a Dragoon. He kind of like treads the line. I think the only problem that you'd really have with Caius being in the roster is that he shares a voice actor with Kain, but quite honestly, that voice actor has a voice that like could melt butter. It's so good, so quite frankly, if you have 2 characters on there with the same voice actor, I ain't gonna complain about that. I also think that 13 needs some more representation, but I think that, you know, you have to be really careful who you pick and choose with 13 because it's such a polarizing game. But I think Caius is pretty widely liked, so I think you're pretty safe to release him. It's a shame that they've specifically said that it's the numbered titles that they're releasing characters from, because I would have loved to have seen another combatant from the Tactics game, whether it be Delita or Orlando. I'd have loved to have seen either of them be representatives of the game, because Orlando tends to be, although Orlando's a tricky one because he tends to be broken in pretty much everything he's in. You play Final Fantasy Brave Exvius, he's busted. You play Record Keeper, he's busted. You play the game that he comes from, he's busted. The trading card game, he's suddenly become pretty good. He's always overpowered, so like, as much as I love Orlando and I'd love to see him in the game, just be careful with balancing him. Not that we're going to see him anyway, but I think that there are plenty of characters that, you know, that could fulfill that role. Seymour would be another great pick, but I think we're quite oversaturated with black mages, and if Yuna's going to come back, we're not going to have another Final Fantasy X representative on top of that. You know, there's Zell, who would have been who was a pretty popular pick when the season pass was announced, or whether the hints were announced, but again, I think that Vayne taking up that kind of monk role would make it so that it's less likely for Zell to turn up. Irvin, however, would be quite cool because we have no gunner in the game right now. Balthea would have been a really good pick, however Vayne is another Final Fantasy 12 pick. So honestly, what I'm trying to get across with this video is that you can kind of start to, like, narrow the scope of the characters that could be in the game and the characters that we'd like to see in the game. The last male character I think would be a really good addition is another FF14 character, because I think FF14 is so widely popular, it would be a shame not to capitalise on it. And I really like Alphinaud. I don't think he's particularly popular, like certainly not next to characters like Thancred. I know Thancred is very, very popular, but I actually really like Alphinaud, and I think that he'd be a really interesting addition to the roster in Dissidia because of the, like, all of his combat comes from a book, and like a kind of like gilded, weaponized book, and it looks really, really cool. So I think that he'd be a really, really cool addition. But I mean, I could sit here for an hour and spout off various different characters I think would be really, really cool additions to the roster. But let me know what you guys think, and sound off in the comments below and let me know what you think. But in conclusion, I reckon the characters I would like to see in the final roster, the last 4 characters, I would love to see Beatrix as the female new character. I'd love to see Gunnar Yuna as the returning female character. I'd love to see Caius, and then I would love to have seen Balthea, but I think Balthea is the least likely one to happen because I think that because we already have Vayne, there's not going to be another Final Fantasy 12 representative. If not Balthea, then Alphinaud. And then the characters I think that are most likely to turn up from those 4 sorts of characters, I think Aranea is very likely to turn up. I think Yuna in her summoner garb is the most likely to turn up, and then past that, it's pretty open-ended. It could be anybody. If it's not, I think Vivi is pretty popular, and I think that he's very, very likely. And I also think that if there's another 10 representative that isn't Yuna, if it does turn out to be Prish instead of her, then Auron would have been a really, really popular choice, because I don't think we really have any samurai character outside of Sephiroth, and Sephiroth's pretty unique in and of himself, so to have a more traditional samurai type role would be quite cool. As I said earlier, sound off in the comments below if you disagree with any of the stuff that I've said, but all I wanted to do is kind of narrow the scope as to what sort of characters I think could be coming out for Dissidia NT and the characters that I'd personally like to see. But let me know who your favourite characters in the franchise are and who you hope turns up in Final Fantasy Dissidia NT. Even if it's not within this season, maybe there'll be a season 2. What I'm trying to do here is I want to rebuild like a community for Dissidia NT because I actually do still really enjoy the game, and I hope that you guys do too. So thank you very much for watching. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel for plenty of content to do with all things Final Fantasy, the card game, Dissidia NT, the phone games. There's all sorts of different things coming onto this channel. So thank you very much again, and I'll speak to you guys soon. Bye!